A few days ago, a quiet archaeology paper dropped into a journal almost no one outside the field ever reads. No press conference, no documentary, just a PDF. But what it describes is the kind of thing that can flip how we look at an entire culture. Using modern satellite imaging, researchers have shown that Rujm el-Hiri, often called Israel's Stonehenge, is not a lonely, weird monument sitting by itself in the Golan Heights. It's the most dramatic piece in the hidden network of at least 28 huge stone circles scattered across the basalt plateau, all built roughly 5,000 years ago. For decades, Rujm el-Hiri was treated like an odd one-off. If you walk up to it on the ground, it looks like chaotic rubble at first. Dark basalt boulders stacked into concentric rings, some walls more than 2 meters thick, wrapping around a central cairn. The whole thing spans about 150 meters across. Local shepherds knew it was there. Pilots noticed its circular pattern from the air in the 1960s and 70s. Archaeologists eventually dated it to the early Bronze Age, somewhere around 3000s to 2700 BCE, and then arguing began. Was it an observatory? A giant tomb? A ritual arena? A boundary marker? Every theory treated it as something unique. That's the assumption the new work blows up. A team based in Israel pulled together years of high-resolution satellite and aerial imagery of the Golan, then did something more systematic than just zooming around on Google Earth. They used remote sensing and pattern detection methods to hunt for circular shapes in the lava stone fields surrounding Rujm el-Hiri. When the algorithms flagged candidates, they checked them against older maps and, where possible, against field surveys. A pattern emerged. Within roughly 25 kilometers of Rujm el-Hiri, they found at least 28 large stone circles, many between 50 and 250 meters across. Only a couple had been properly recorded before. The rest had been half-erased by time, farming, grazing, and erosion. On the ground, a lot of them just read as messy rock piles. On a processed satellite map, you plot them all out, and suddenly Rujm el-Hiri is no longer the circle. It sits near the center of a loose constellation of circles, like a bright star in the middle of a 5,000-year-old cluster. Up close, the family resemblance is hard to ignore. Most of these circles are built from the same kind of local basalt fieldstones. They're laid out as broad rings with low walls. Many include inner cells, radial walls, or little chambers attached to the main circle. Some are associated with dolmens or burial mounds. Others sit next to traces of ancient fields or trackways cut into the plateau. They're far too big and too consistently shaped to be random heaps of stone. Somebody had to plan them, coordinate labor, and agree on what a proper circle looked like and where it should sit in the landscape. That's why archaeologists are now talking about a regional stone circle tradition instead of a single freak monument. Rujm el-Hiri starts to look less like a bizarre exception and more like the biggest, most elaborate member of a circle-building culture that left marks all over the Golan. Standing inside its rings today, you're not just in an isolated ritual ground in the middle of nowhere. You're standing in what may have been the main gathering place at the heart of a whole network of similar sites, all carved into the black stone around you. So what were these places for? Earlier work on Rujm el-Hiri leaned hard into astronomy. Some researchers argued that particular walls lined up with solstice sunrises or certain star risings, making it a kind of stone observatory. That idea never fully went away, but more precise measurements, plus the fact that the region has moved and flexed over thousands of years, have made a pure giant instrument explanation harder to defend. Alignments that look exact now may not be original, and the new circles don't all show the same clear pointing at the sky. The new study shifts the conversation. When you look at the internal layout of these circles, they don't behave like normal towns. You don't see dense house plans, lots of domestic spaces, or the kind of everyday trash you expect from permanent settlements. Instead, you see big enclosures, designed entrances, inner compartments, and central features that would have controlled how people moved around once they stepped inside. In archaeological language, that's the footprint of a place you go into for specific moments, not somewhere you live. Ceremonial grounds, meeting places, sites for feasts, seasonal gatherings, negotiations, rites of passage, funerals, events that are more about symbol and identity than about cooking dinner or herding goats. Now stretch that logic across 28 circles built within a few centuries of each other. You start to see a region that wasn't just dotted with random monuments, but held together by a shared way of gathering. The authors of the study talk about a ritualized cultural landscape, architecture, geography, and social life all reinforcing each other. In that picture, Rujm el-Hiri, with its size and complexity, becomes the premier gathering ground, the big circle at the center. The other rings might have been more local or specialized, but they're playing in the same cultural language. That's where the portal idea comes in. Nobody serious is saying these circles were sci-fi stargates. The portal part is about experience. Stepping across a threshold into a different kind of space. You pass through the ring, or a marked entrance, and you're no longer just in the ordinary landscape. You're in a bounded, charged environment where different rules apply. Ritual rules, social rules, story rules. Stone circles all over the world seem to play with that idea of a liminal zone, a border between everyday life and something heightened. The fact that 24 more of those thresholds are now visible in satellite data across the Golan tells us something simple and powerful about the people who built them over generations. They poured enormous effort into carving out places where community, belief, and the wider cosmos could meet in a formal way. Part of what makes this discovery so compelling is how it happened. The same satellite and remote sensing techniques used to monitor crops, watch ice melt, and track troop movements are now being turned on ancient landscapes. From ground level, many of these circles are damaged, overgrown, or broken up by modern plowing and construction. You could walk right past them and never guess how they once looked. From orbit, processed with the right filters, their outlines suddenly pop against the dark basalt. Faint rings, but rings all the same. It's a reminder of how much of the ancient world is still hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right set of eyes and tools. It also plugs a gap in a weirdly blank part of the timeline. Around 5,000 years ago, this whole region was in motion. City-states were starting to form. Trade routes across the Levant and beyond were tightening. People were experimenting with new ways to show power and identity in stone. In Egypt, that era overlaps with the first pyramids. In Britain, it overlaps with the main building phases at Stonehenge. On the Golan, it now looks like the local expression of that same urge was massive black stone circles spread across the hills. You can see why that has captured the imagination. Religious writers and prophecy fans are already folding this into their own stories. Headlines talk about Israel's Stonehenge no longer alone and ancient networks under modern Israel and Syria. Some commentators draw loose connections to biblical high places and communal gatherings mentioned in later texts, seeing these circles as deep echoes of those scenes. The scientists themselves are much more cautious. They talk about dates, diameters, wall plans, and landscape context. But even if you strip away all the extra symbolism, the core facts are wild enough. Dozens of large, carefully built circles. A central monument now clearly part of a broader pattern. A ritual landscape laid out in stone across a plateau we mostly know today from conflict headlines and border maps. So when you hear that 28 hidden star circles have been found in Israel, that doesn't mean someone just found a fantasy map of secret gates. It means that with the help of satellites and data, archaeologists have realized that Rujm el-Hiri, the big, mysterious ring of basalt in the Golan, is actually one node in a much larger network of early Bronze Age stone circles. These weren't villages or forts. They look like gathering grounds, architectural portals into shared rituals and shared identities for a culture that left almost no written record. The stones haven't moved in 5 millennia. What changed is our vantage point, and with every new image from the sky, the old map of this landscape and the people who shaped it gets stranger, richer, and just a little bit sharper.